Hello and welcome to the channel's book club. The thing about libraries like this is you can get books of all sorts. I can see here a book written by Daniel Steele, a novel, The Betrayal. There's a book by Billy Graham, a religious book, Onto the Hills. And you have here Nelson Mandela's famous Long Walk to Freedom. And of course, one of my all-time favorites. It's a book titled The Autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr. It tells the story of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and how he was eventually assassinated. Now, you don't have to always have books in this form. You can also have books like this in audiobook format. It's titled The Devils Arithmetic. And you can recall on the channel's book club, we once hosted the author of this book, Pastor Ladi Thompson, who gave us an insight into what this intriguing audiobook is all about. Now, with the recent events in South Africa, the xenophobic events in South Africa, we thought it would be a good idea to talk to Pastor Ladi Thompson again, because chapter 7 of his book specifically focused on South Africa. So in this episode today, our first guest is Ladi Thompson. He'll be looking at his audiobook, The Devils Arithmetic, chapter 7, and looking at the issues happening in South Africa today. Enjoy the interview. For those who are unfamiliar with your audiobook, can you please provide a bit of a background? I have to confess to you that the first time I saw your audiobook, the title, I wasn't very sure about what to expect. But it turned out to be a very intriguing, very exciting book. Can you give a bit of a background, an insight into The Devil's Arithmetic?
Yes, thank you. Quite a number of people who had listened to the audiobook, especially the same 7th chapter, began to call me up after the murders started across South Africa, the xenophobic actions across South Africa. And they said, oh my God, that's what you wrote in your book, that this was going to happen. And I did say yes. If you look at what we call the Devil's Arithmetic, I told you it was like an equation that you apply to a people, a race, that produces a master race and a slave race. And I did point out throughout the book that wherever this equation has been applied, if you don't understand its antidote and how to handle it, even when you escape and stop the slavery, this system, this equation keeps working and can actually keep working for 350 years before people realize it. And that's why I was able to say beforehand that looking at the South African case and look at the social engineering that went into South Africa, it was obvious that South Africa, as beautiful as it looks on the surface, remains still today a rumbling volcano that will continue to erupt until Africans learn the wisdom to handle the root causes of the xenophobic reactions.
You seem to be saying that every time we see a master-slave relationship, whether it's apartheid, whether it's colonialism or whatever, you seem to be saying it's usually calculated and deliberately executed. It sounds like a conspiracy, if I may say. But is that your point? That it's all calculated, it's all deliberate?
Oh, precisely. Now, for the Willie Lynch letters, the Americans, when they dabbled into slavery, it wasn't productive because they didn't have the equation. You see, man by nature is not a slave. So the Africans didn't cooperate. So they imported a slave dealer, somebody who owned a plantation in the West Indies, 1712 on the banks of the James River in the colony of Virginia. And he taught them the secret and then gave them the engineering, this Devil's Arithmetic, with a guarantee of 350 years. And it succeeded. However, we want to remember that the version of the Devil's Arithmetic that was used in Egypt was even different and deeper. And that's why the ancient Egyptian civilization lasted for 3,000 years. There's no nation that's been a world power consistently for 3,000 years, only Egypt. And you see, its secret was that Devil's Arithmetic and the fact that it's self-replicating. If you know how to use the system, a little core of people apply the Devil's Arithmetic and you can predict generation after generation, self-replicating, and make sure that your little crop of group will exploit as long as that equation is stable. So whether it's apartheid South Africa, the Roman army knew this secret. Ancient Rome knew it. Adolf Hitler knew this secret. His extermination of 6 million Jews was not an emotional thing. It was part of a calculation. So if you go back all the way to Napoleon Bonaparte and all the major people who, were able to conquer the world and establish empires that lasted for quite some distance, most of them, including the British Empire, understood these things. Apartheid South Africa, they understand it. And there's only one agreement, was that basically you don't write these things down. So all over the world, there are only about 2 or 3 documents that actually capture the Devil's Arithmetic and the methodology and the steps that you need to yoke a people from the natural state of being human beings and turn them into subhumans with limited expressions of intelligence, the ability to emote, to appreciate arts and things like that.
So how do you feel seeing the xenophobic occurrences in South Africa today in the light of what you've written in your book?
Well, if you listen to the 7th chapter very well, you will see that we pointed out that the South Africans, first of all, they were partakers of they were affected by the wave of slavery, initial, that went across the world. And apart from human slavery, they also were victims of something even worse than colonialism. The apartheid regime in South Africa brought in the Devil's Arithmetic that was even a fiercer application than that of colonialism. And what had happened is that as the years grew, there's a natural tendency for nature to upset the engineering of the Devil's Arithmetic. So every now and then, even though you produce blacks whose appreciation is limited, you produce blacks whose imagination is limited, you produce blacks who are more, frankly speaking, living just above a subhuman level. They will not invent anything new. They're not going to create new computers. They don't think about taking a man to the moon. Poetry and higher forms of literature are just beyond their ken and things like that. And when you produce people like that on a massive scale, the effect of that arithmetic lives in them even as they pass it to their children. Now, on the other side, the people who apply the arithmetic to are also affected. They lose their humanity. You have to be very cruel. So there's no gain in the Devil's Arithmetic. So the master race, the Afrikaners, or whatever they'll call them, the Dutch who established apartheid in South Africa, when the people in charge of that equation noticed that the South Africans were multiplying, they began to resist because democracy was all over the whole world. Apartheid wasn't going to last forever. They realized because of external influences and the population explosion of the blacks that apartheid would not last forever. They decided to quickly step in and re-engineer. So what they did was that they picked out a hero in Mandela and molded opinion until they built consensus to the point that Mandela became an icon. All of a sudden, they were building statues to him in the UK and all that and all that. But what was the major usefulness of the Mandela brand? He reorganized a new relationship between master and slave for a new South Africa where everybody will be equal without touching the distribution of wealth.
So you are saying the xenophobia we are seeing in South Africa today is a direct result of what you have tagged as a devil's arithmetic in your audiobook?
Part of what the devil's arithmetic injects is that, like animals, you cannot work together in collectivity. So like animals, you are very mean to one another. Survival of the fittest is the name of the game. When a whale was washed ashore in Nigeria, nobody saw a whale, nobody saw the beauty of God. What we saw was food. A whale washes up ashore somewhere else where you have not tampered with the men. What they see is the beauty of God, and they help the whale to get back into water. But you see, subhumans who have been engineered see only food. And once that food supply is threatened, like dogs eating from a common plate, they turn against each other. So the social engineers behind South Africa, they knew this. They knew that the eruptions would be in the townships and all that. And as other Africans from the nations that were bombed while they were defending South Africa, when they all moved into the South African economy to be a part of it, they knew that the blacks would respond to them because they had used the Mandela brand to direct the anger away from those who were behind it. You see, this successful engineering also happened in Rwanda. It's called the Devil's Arithmetic. And it's so predictable that until the South Africans, or at least an African country, understands it and takes leadership to neutralize it, we're going to see a lot more of this kind of action.
In chapter 7, you spoke a lot about Steve Biko and about how people like him who understand, the real reasons things like xenophobia, apartheid, and so on are happening, how they ultimately get eliminated. Is that true? Is that correct?
Now, what I said was that the answer to this so-called xenophobia in South Africa is right there in South Africa. All they need to do is to go back and look at the notes written by Bantu Stephen Biko. Steve Biko was ultra brilliant. Steve Biko's life was cut short by the apartheid government because he had the ability that they don't want a slave to have. Steve Biko made a statement that if you ask the right questions, you will get the right answers. Steve Biko looked at apartheid and said it was not primarily about color. And he pointed out that it was not natural, it was man-made, it was engineered. Steve Biko said this, and pointed out to South Africa that ask the right questions, check this thing very well, and you will discover the secret to it. The moment the apartheid government saw what he was writing, looked at his thought patterns, and saw that he had the ability to communicate his findings, and they knew that what he was saying, if they allowed it to grow, he could have destroyed apartheid in 3 weeks. He had to die. And once you speak and they realize that you understand the system and that you will destroy that control, you destroy the advantage, immediately they killed him. Now for South Africa, my simple counsel is very easy. First of all, go back to the notes of Stephen Biko. Go back and realize at the end of the day that there are minds that think ahead of you. It's like a chess game. And they're so far ahead of the average of the ANC that they're able to apply social engineering things knowing what the outcome would be. I mean, we're still in Africa today wearing ties in tropical heat. The Devil's Arithmetic and all its things are still in Nigeria today. But as we get an understanding of it, we can join hands across Africa and beat this trap and turn the tables. What was meant for evil will now be turned from a tragedy into a triumph for Africa.
Thank you very much, Pastor Ladi Thompson.
The pleasure is mine.